Josh is our historian as it relates to the charter and FFA, and so if there are questions with regard to how we got here, how this thing evolved really from 1928 up to the present. You know, there have been some critical dates that have encompassed the charter, and Josh is here to address any of those things. But Scott, thank you for the invitation. Jay and Katie, thanks for arranging this for us. I am more than happy to answer questions, and generally what I would suggest that we do is, and you can see my screen, and if anyone cannot see my screen, Katie, I assume that there's a way for them to unmute or send a message and let us know that.
Yes, they do. They can't be unmuted, but they do have a chat box that they can utilize to let me know they're having issues.
Okay, very good. And I think it's important that the chat box function is there. Katie, perhaps you can help monitor this for me. And if questions come in during the discussion, then I'm happy to address those. I don't want to clutter up my screen with the chat box since I'm presenting and you see this working version of the federal charter in front of you. But I want to give you just a little bit of background, and as I go through the various pages of the charter, I will stop periodically to assure that we can take any questions about what I've covered thus far. This is, a critically important document to FFA in that it provides the governance document for FFA. It is, in essence, our articles of incorporation. As Josh, our historian, would tell us that when FFA was formed, we had been formed as a corporate entity in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And when the federal charter was passed and signed by President Truman in 1950, the governance through the incorporation in the Commonwealth of Virginia was abandoned, and we in essence became incorporated under the federal charter. And the charter itself is designed to outline how FFA will operate, how our board will be structured, what our relative purposes are. The charter was updated really unbeknownst to FFA in the late 90s, probably in the 1996 or 8 timeframe. And it was basically brought up to date at that time, according to congressional standards. But we believe that the charter can be improved upon in many ways. But I think the thing that has driven this has been our relationship with the U.S. Department of Education. This relationship has evolved over the last 37 years. And if you've read the charter, you'll see that under the present situation, basically the Secretary of Education is called out as the chair and advisor of FFA, and that 4 of the remaining board positions, a total of 9 board positions, 4 of the remaining positions would come from representatives from the United States Department of Education. Now, over a number of years, we have worked on a series of memorandums of understanding with the department that has allowed us to appoint individuals to the board with the approval of the Department of Education. For a period of time, those were teachers, teacher educators, as well as business and industry representatives. And that worked relatively well until the recent years, when we have had much more difficulty getting our appointees approved by the department. Because these individuals on the board represent the Department of Education, they are unable to approve someone, for instance, that works for a for-profit entity. So someone like Ruth Kimmelshoe, who had served on our board for a period of time, is no longer eligible to represent the Department of Education in that seat because she is gainfully employed by a for-profit entity, and that is unacceptable under federal rules and under the way the Department of Education interprets those rules. I would tell you that the overall relationship with the Department of Education has, I think to say deteriorated would maybe be an overstatement, but it has become more challenging over the most recent years. As the department has looked at the allocation of time from our national advisor and chair, who of course is Dr. Steve Brown, as well as the allocation of time from the department by the executive secretary, and that role has been filled most recently by Shireen Donaldson. In short, Dr. Brown is allocated at 80% of his time to FFA and Shireen at 20%. So we in essence have gone from a situation where we had two virtually full-time employees at one time from the department that were supporting FFA down to the equivalent of one full-time person. And the department really doesn't want to be in the business of governance. They don't want to have to approve board members. They don't want to have to allocate staff to FFA. They see their own department having been experienced budget cuts in and of themselves. They've gone, according to them, from a staff of 75 down to a staff of 35 in career technical education with the same amount of work, and they don't want to devote that single full-time employee position to FFA. They also, I think this was also brought to a head when some conversations were had between the Department of Education and our board, where our board had expressed concerns about that allocation of time, as well as the qualifications of our executive secretary with regard to experience in FFA and experience in agricultural education. Thank you. I think you can hear me again. So that said, I've been in conversation with the department now, really ever since I came on board. They have indicated to us meaning FFA, that, and this is my term, they would like to have an amicable divorce with FFA. They have not wanted to be in the business of governing us or allocating employees to us. They want FFA to be able to govern itself. So since last fall, we've been in discussions with the department on how that could work, what that could look like, and we have covered a lot of ground both there as well as in the profession, where we have gone from a situation where we questioned whether or not we needed a federal charter to the point we are now where we believe we want to and have decided to continue to have a federal charter, but we want that charter to be amended to meet the current and ongoing governance needs of FFA. So I'd like to begin walking through that charter if you'll turn to your computer screens and start looking at the document in front of you. This is the draft version that we have prepared, that we've presented to state staff, that our board has reviewed, and that you are now seeing as ag education professionals. And you see kind of the boilerplate language at the beginning with regard to the opening and how this charter was created in 1950. And there you see that 1998 when the 105th Congress reviewed and passed it. This refers to the organization which uses the name Future Farmers of America. We call ourselves National FFA Organization, as you can see. And you will also see where it says in this chapter. I've had questions about that. Shouldn't it say charter? But under the language that's used in these types of documents, they do in fact use the terminology to refer to this document and the parts of this document as chapters, not to be confused with our FFA chapters. This is a document that allows us to continue to exist perpetually and goes immediately into section 70902, which outlines the purposes of the corporation. I would say with the exception of 1 and 2, these are largely similar or the same to the purposes that were outlined in the original document. There have been some upgrades and maybe some wordsmithing, but the intent of the purposes beyond 1 and 2 have remained largely the same. What we have done in 1 and 2 is attempted to strengthen the language relating to the 3-component model. For many years, we have, as a profession, pointed to this charter and used that as our basis for the integral nature of FFA in the ag education classroom and the experiential learning situation that our students have in that 3-component model, when in fact our charter really never said that. So in this section in purposes 1 and 2, we are calling that out specifically so that there's really no question about that or the integral nature of FFA in the classroom. You'll also see that we refer to ourselves as agriculture, food, and natural resources as involved in that ag education. We're trying to think of the future. We're trying to think about how we will engage students in 2025 and beyond. And as you've seen in universities and other places, we feel that type of language is more inclusive of the kind of things that we will represent into the future. We have also been aware of using language such as experiential learning. You see that used here, and we are changing that wording in our next revision so that it talks about work-based experiential learning. We're not including the SAE acronym because we have done our best to avoid acronyms of that sort. That acronym has changed over the years, and we want to give future generations an opportunity to name that the appropriate acronym in 2025 and beyond, but understanding it'll still be experiential and work-based learning. So you are welcome to look through those purposes. I believe we sent these out to you, and once I go through section 70903, I'll pause and give you an opportunity to ask any questions about these first 2 sections. You'll see here in 70903 where we talk about membership, the eligibility, and how voting is done. What you will see throughout is that we have done our best as we have drafted this version and this revision to be as broad as we believe we can, and to allow our Constitution and bylaws to be called out as the true guiding documents for the organization. Of course, those are the documents that are approved by our delegates from the states, and we want to be as broad as we can in this law so that our delegates and our states and our members can determine the way the organization is operated and governed down the road. So I'm going to stop there, and Kate, I'm going to ask you to help monitor if there are any questions from anyone.
Sure. So at this time, if you're on your computer, if you want to raise your hand, I can take questions that way. There is also a questions section and a chat section if you want to ask questions there. Does not look like we have anything at this time.
Okay, well, I'll continue on then. Section 70904 is where in the current charter it calls out the specifics of our board of directors. Under our current structure, there are 4 board members. 1 each comes from the 4 regions of the state staff, NASAE, and then those, if you will, Department of Education approved positions, with Dr. Brown as the chair and advisor of FFA. Now, the charter, in essence, doesn't create the national advisor position or the executive secretary position, but it does indicate where those positions will come from. That said, we have been unable over the last year to fill 2 of the 9 board positions. 2 of the board positions that would be approved by the Department of Education, one of which was that business and industry position that had been filled by Ruth Kimmelshoe. A second was a position from the state associations, an executive secretary of a state association, not the FFA national executive secretary, but an executive secretary from a state association. We had recommended an individual to the Department of Education, and really inexplicably, that individual was rejected. And we have found it to be very difficult to identify the process we are supposed to go through with the government to get a position of that sort approved. So we've been operating with only 7 of the 9 board members really for the past year. This calls out that the board of directors, the new draft calls out that individuals representing education, agriculture, food, natural resources, and FFA will be represented on the board. And the number of directors, how the terms of office, really how the governance process works, will be provided in FFA's constitution and bylaws. It also, as is called out now, indicates how the board will meet, as well as officers of the corporation, indicates that we will have a national advisor, as I said, an executive secretary, as well as a treasurer, with those responsibilities outlined in our constitution and bylaws. As is stated now, it calls out a governing committee that will be composed of at least 3 individuals on the board that can act on behalf of the board between board meetings. I'll go on to section 70905, which are the national student officers. Today in our charter, it indicates that there will be 6 national FFA officers. We are, as you read this, we've added 2 words, that there will be at least 6 national student officers. Now, that doesn't mean that we have our designs on immediately moving to an expanded slate of national officers. But if you think about the size of the organization in 1950 when that was called out, and you think about the number of members we have today, could there be an opportunity in our future that we would want to or need to expand the number of national officers to serve our student members? So that said, you see here that we are calling out that could change. And how those elections take place and the voting rights of delegates, again, will be called out in the Constitution and bylaws of the corporation. I'll stop there. Any questions?
I still don't have any.
Okay, well, we'll just keep going. There'll be plenty of time at the end for questions. Perhaps, Katie, if at the end we can unmute everyone and we can have verbal questions at the end.
Yes.
Let me move on then to 70906, and this is the things that it says powers, but these are the things under our incorporating documents or our governance documents that we are allowed to do. And you can read through those. These are largely the same or similar to what we have today. You know, one of the things, if you look at number 9, under our current charter, we are required to publish a magazine. Under this revision, we are being a little more general, that we will produce publications, websites, or other media. We don't know what other media will be available 10 years or 20 years from now. I mean, it was 10 years ago that the smartphones were introduced, so you can see how quickly things changed. We want to be able to have more flexibility down the road to reach out to our associations, chapters, members, advisors, and state staff than being required to print a magazine. And I mean, we'll stop printing a magazine, but it will be our choice on whether or not we do that. Section 70907 is a little bit of boilerplate language that you would see in any articles of incorporation for a business or organization, where we are calling out the names of our organization. Even though we refer to ourselves as National FFA Organization, we don't want to give up the terminology Future Farmers of America. We don't want somebody else to take over that term, so we're going to keep that in the organizational documents. In 70908, this is a section that already appears in our current charter with regard to restrictions. Of course, we can't issue stock or pay dividends. There is a nuance to item B on political activities. Under the current charter, myself or senior leaders in FFA, directors, officers of the corporation are not allowed to really have any political activity that would involve, for instance, supporting a candidate, making a contribution to a candidate. And under this document, we're calling out that those activities, those political activities, can't take place if any of us are acting on behalf of the corporation. But as an individual, we still have the right to support a candidate or assist a political party for elective public office. We think that's only fair and appropriate. There's also a section here where you see under item D, for instance, it says loans. The corporation may not make a loan to a director, officer, or employee. That appears in our current charter, but then it goes on to say what would take place if we did make a loan. So we've taken that language out. If the document says we can't make a loan to anybody, then we shouldn't need language in there on what we do if we do make a loan to someone. So it was quite confusing and really unnecessary. Now I would tell you this is a section 70909 that has probably caused the most heartburn for most of our stakeholders. And that is that under this draft, we have identified that we want to have what we would call an arm's length relationship with the Department of Education, with the Department of Agriculture, not limited to those federal agencies, on things that would be interesting to those governmental entities and us. And of course, you're familiar with the most recent MOU that we signed with the Department of Agriculture last week. That would be an example of collaboration and a relationship with a federal agency. We are hearing the states when they are telling us, one, that the charter is important. Secondly, that we need a firmer tie, if you will, to the Department of Education. That message has reached us loud and clear, and so that you're aware, next week when our board of directors meets, we will be discussing the potential of ways that we could address that. And so I don't really want to go into more detail than that now, but we are identifying how we could have more definitive language about our relationship with the Department of Education that would be included in the charter. And it might revolve around the fact, for instance, that a board member comes from the Department of Education. But I really want to speak with our board of directors as we would look at one more set of revisions to the charter. Headquarters and office. Right now, our headquarters and principal office are at the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. And again, this is one where we want to say that's going to be provided in our bylaws, and that as it is now, we can conduct our activities throughout the United States and territories and possessions of the U.S. 70911 talks about records, not unlike what we have now on where records are kept and how we will keep records. Section 70912 is again somewhat boilerplate language about in the case that FFA were sued, how that lawsuit would be served to us rather, and the fact that it wouldn't have to be served at the district court in Washington, D.C. Again, as is boilerplate in documents of this type, when you look at 70913, that there is a statement about the corporation being liable for the acts of its officers and agents acting within the scope of their responsibilities and on behalf of FFA. And it also calls out, as the document does now, what would happen in the event that FFA ceased to exist and there were assets to be distributed. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the national charter, what I would call the most current draft version. There will be some additional updates to this, I fully expect. I would also tell you that we had a comment period with states. You know, it's good that in our family we can have very frank discussions, and we've had some very frank conversations with members of the Ag Ed family and the FFA family, and I think that's good. We've kind of slowed down the bus a little bit to make sure everybody can have a say. I want to take this to the board so the board understands what the comments have been so that they can contemplate what they want the next version of the charter to look like. And we've already arranged with Jason Davis, who is the head of NASAE, that at their convention held in conjunction with National FFA Convention, we're going to have an opportunity to have some roundtable discussions and some breakout sessions with NASAE representatives from the states on where we are at that time. So let me just look through my notes and see if I have forgotten anything obvious. I think I'll stop there with regard to the charter and open it up for any questions that you might have. And maybe, Katie, if we could unmute so everybody can ask.
Yes, I do have a couple that came in the last little portion. Jim Connors says in section 70904A2.
Yes.
Why does it say individuals representing education ... instead of agricultural education?
You know, we've had that question come up, and this would probably, you know, I would answer it, and I think Josh has a comment as well. If we were to invite someone from a state department of education or a university or even the U.S. Department of Education, if we are too limiting in some of this language, it may be challenging for us to be able to find those individuals. Now, that said, this is not the last statement that's made on the makeup of the board. The Constitution and bylaws will be the items that will call out specifically who the profession and who FFA wants to have on their board. And I think it's fair to say that will be agricultural education professionals will be well represented. But as I said, what you're looking at here is a law. We want this law to stay in effect for a long time, be all-encompassing, but not to be too restrictive on what we do. We want the Constitution and bylaws to call that out.
Thank you. Then we have two questions from Corey Fontes. The first is, do other CTE sectors and intracurricular organizations have charters like ours? And are they experiencing the relationship that we are with DOE? And how often can a charter be revised? Okay, great questions.
We are one of about 100 organizations in the United States that have a federal charter. We are, to my knowledge, the only of the career technical education organizations to have a federal charter. So we are unique in that respect. There are 6 of those organizations where the federal government has a role in appointing board members. And the issue with that, maybe there's more than 6, but there's only, Josh, go ahead.
Yeah, there's 6 that have six organizations that have a relationship with agencies, federal agencies, and then where Mark was going, but only one organization which agency actually selects those members to serve on their board of directors.
And a majority of those board members
Correct.
to serve. We're the only one where a majority serves.
And that's us.
And that's National FFA.
Right.
The federal government is not issuing new charters. New charters are not coming out, but there are amendments being done to charters. In the last session of Congress, there were several federal charters that were revised. We have a very good relationship on Capitol Hill. And honestly, I believe that once our family agrees on the content and the context of the next charter, that we can be very successful in getting this approved and these changes made. Did I cover everything in that question?
Sounds like it's me. I'll go ahead and unmute Corey. All right, Corey.
Yeah, I'm here. No, yeah, what are the other organizations that I guess play a role with the federal government? Because I guess when you think of other pathways that have intracurricular programs, I mean, we think that there's a lot of them, but I mean, I would have assumed that there was a lot more that would have been involved, I guess, with the government.
No, there are, I've got these materials in front of me. The organization where there is a role in maybe we need to mute again, Katie. Otherwise,
There we go. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Here are the organizations that I referenced: the American Battle Monuments Commission, the United States Holocaust Memorial Council, the Corporation for the Promotion of Rifle Practice and Firearms Safety, and the United Service Organizations, which we know as USO. And the President of the United States also appoints 20 members of the 50-member board of the American Red Cross. Those would be the organizations, and National FFA.
And I think it's important to note that it's the federal charter that we have. Other career technical education groups don't have the federal charter with as we do. So there may still be connections in terms of education or pathway work at the department, but in terms of the career technical student organization, those other CTSOs have charters probably within the respective states in which their headquarters are located.
Right.
Yeah. Got it. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like we have another one from Kevin. Why are we not designating the number of board members in our Constitution? What will those numbers be, and how do we ensure there is representation across the board and not heavy in one specific area? Kevin, I'll go ahead and answer to you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and begin addressing that. I think the question, and thank you for your question, Kevin, was what have we identified as the size of the board and who's going to be represented on the FFA Board of Directors via the Constitution? Let me first of all say that, trying to get the timing of a revised an amended federal charter and working through amendments to the FFA Constitution and bylaws, and to have those come together simultaneously is unrealistic, and it's likely not going to happen. We've identified that we can continue to operate for a period of time under our current Constitution and bylaws and work through the process of bringing recommendations on the Constitution and what those bylaws will look at and what the board of directors would look like. Now, I can tell you that the leadership team here at FFA has worked through some scenarios. We've done some scenario planning on what a board of directors could look like. Our board, I feel that it's appropriate that the FFA organization board of directors have an opportunity to contemplate that before I would share some of those ideas with all of you. But I can assure you that our recommendation will be is there will continue to be a strong agricultural education presence, teacher education presence, state staff presence, but as well having the opportunity for us to perhaps have governmental individuals represented as appropriate, or college representatives as appropriate, or business and industry individuals as appropriate. We could also envision that we could perhaps have an at-large position or something of that nature where you could have leaders from another non-for-profit be a part of our board. So there's lots of opportunities on the way that board could be structured. But that is, I hope you can understand that if we tried to present a draft charter and a draft constitution and draft bylaws to start with, we will never get this approved. We just never get it done. We kind of have to bite this elephant one chew at a time. And that's the way we're approaching it. But I appreciate your question, Kevin.
All right, we have another one from Jim Connors in relation to section 70909B.
Okay.
Will the National FFA Advisor and Exec Secretary positions eventually leave the Department of Education and become FFA positions?
Under this draft amendment, the answer to that question would be yes. That they would no longer be positions that would be provided by, paid for, or appointed by the United States Department of Education. And that would evolve so that they would be people that would be selected by or associated with National FFA.
All right, and then from Troy White, we have, do the bylaws have the authority to keep an office in DC, or could dropping DC from the charter result in our loss of a DC office?
Under what we are saying here, we would have, as an organization, the full opportunity to identify if we want to have an office in DC or anywhere else. Indianapolis, any other city that we may need, and Washington, DC. I can tell you that as we've had these discussions, there hasn't been a single one that I've been involved in where anyone is recommending that we would not have an office in the DC area. We just want to be able to have the flexibility of managing the organization and giving folks 15, 20 years down the road the opportunity to manage the organization. That's really what we're doing. And please don't interpret that statement as being anything to indicate that we're trying to exit Washington, D.C.
All right, I'm going to start unmuting everyone so we can open the floor for questions that way. I'll start with Anne because she just raised her hand. So if you could please mute yourself on your phone if you're not asking a question so that it doesn't interrupt their speaking abilities, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
And you are live.
Thank you. My question is, are you able to share the MOU that has been written for the U.S. Department of Agriculture? Because we're getting some pressure here in some of our states with minimizing some of our programs, and so a strong relationship with our state Department of Agriculture is becoming increasingly important.
We would love to share that with you, and we are happy to do that. If you would send us an email, jbledsoe@ffa.org, Josh will make sure that you get that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You bet.
Glad to do it.
I want to make one more. I want to cover something as well that may spur a question or two. There's when we have these discussions, there's some gray area, if you will, because we have this overlap or seeming overlap between FFA and agricultural education. We all recognize FFA does not exist without ag education in the classroom, and we respect that. But because this federal charter represents the governance of FFA, we've had a lot of questions and discussions about ag education being called out in this document. So we had I think, and Jay's on the phone, I think a very constructive discussion with Jay and the other leaders of the AERO groups, NASAE, AAAE, the council, and talking about how we could as a profession, be more deliberate in the way that we assure that ag education as a profession has a voice in Washington, D.C. And you probably heard from my previous question, we have no intention of pulling out of Washington, D.C. In fact, we're looking at ways from an FFA standpoint to continue to strengthen what we're doing there and our presence there. And what we've had some initial discussions about is, could the ag ed profession have an advocacy individual in DC that would perhaps be housed with FFA or partially funded by FFA and the other AERO organizations? And I think there's some interest in that. So we think it's important that the ag ed profession, as well as FFA, has a voice. And I just want to assure you that those good conversations are happening in our family about how we might be able to do that.
We did have another question from Jim. He said, in reference to FFA Constitution and bylaws, is the National FFA open to eliminating the Constitution and only having bylaws like most modern organizations?
Honestly, that is not a discussion that we have had. I think the good thing for us about having a Constitution is the process by which that Constitution is approved and the kind of consensus and agreement that you have to have from all of our state associations in order to really affect the governance of FFA. So I guess I'm not going to say never, but that's not been something we have contemplated at this point. We have proceeded forward as if we would revise our Constitution and bylaws to match a new reality that would be reflected in an amended federal charter. But thanks for the question.
Dan just sent me another question. Is it possible to share a copy of the MOU with the Department of Agriculture with us as state leaders?
Yeah, we
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely we will. And I would open that to anyone. If that document is helpful, let us know. And you know, and we can also, we have a document, as you're aware, that we signed about 3 weeks ago with the American Farm Bureau Federation as well, that calls out the strong relationship we have with them, formalizes that, and focuses on careers in agriculture. So we're happy to share those documents. Let us know if you would like those. And I would say in the case of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that is already a living, breathing way of working with USDA. Josh and I are both fielding calls from USDA this week about ways of continuing to advance that relationship and carry out the intent of the MOU. So those things are working, and they aren't just lip service. Other questions?
Yeah, so I've got a question about where does this Constitution then, how does it fit into our charter documents? I mean, is it a component of the charter? Is it a separate document that nobody's ever going to see? Or, you know, I'm wondering how that relationship happens. This is Kevin from Alaska.
Well, Kevin, thanks for your question. And, you know, the charter will not be included, if you will, or a part of the federal charter. It is supportive of the way the organization will operate. And a constitution and bylaws helps us define really the specifics about the way FFA is governed, the way we operate as an organization, terms for board members, how our national officers operate, really the specifics that give an organization a level of structure. We don't want to do that in the federal charter because a law is just too hard to change. A constitution and bylaws has to be approved by our membership and by delegates, and as well by the board of directors. So it gives a broader number of individuals a chance to weigh in on the specifics about the way FFA operates. The incorporating documents gives us an overall structure for FFA and defines us overall. It's really about how you incorporate any business or other organization. And there is a constitution and bylaws that exist today. I would suggest that a cup of hot milk and a nice warm fire in the winter and a copy of our Constitution and bylaws will probably put you to sleep in a short amount of time, but they're important documents to FFA.
We had a question from Troy White. How much does opening up the charter for changes in a partisan Congress open it up to changes beyond the control of our family?
Well, I think that's a fair question to ask, and I appreciate that question. You know, I would first of all call out the support that Perkins has gotten, the bipartisan support that Perkins has gotten, and the fact that there have been very few dissenting votes in the House of Representatives when that has come for a floor vote or for a discussion. We have broad bipartisan appeal in Washington, D.C., and I think we're very fortunate for that. We saw that again last week when we were there with State President's Conference. Could we have that? Of course we could, but I think as we are deliberate in identifying the members of Congress who will help support this type of legislation, when you consider that we also have friends at the White House in Ray Starling and the role he plays, and has been very helpful to us. And in many cases, these kinds of situations don't have to go to a floor vote. They are perhaps tacked on to other legislation, or they are passed by what's called affirmation. So to a large degree, we even though we're not as important as healthcare or as important as, you know, discussions on taxes or trade, I think we have a very good environment to get this thing in place. That must be Jay tap dancing. Other questions? Katie, we've either put all the rest of them to sleep, or at the very least, we've been able to address most of the questions folks have.
I think I'd go with the last option.
Okay. All right. Well, I want everyone to know I appreciate your attention and your interest in this. This is an important document to us. It's an important conversation to have. We are working really hard to do what's right for the profession as well as what's right for FFA. And if you have burning questions or insights, you know how to find us. And don't hesitate to let us hear from you. So thank you.
Scott, are you still with us? All right, well, I think we may have lost Scott, but Mark, thank you so much for your time. We really enjoyed having you speak to us. Very enlightening, and thank you everyone for your questions and participating, and just enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.